I love Studio Ghibli films. Over the course of the past year and a half, 2 years, I have watched 7 Ghibli films. The best thing about all of these films is just the sheer beauty that all of these films exude, whether it be in the story, the animation, the characters, the background, the music, etc., etc. Every time I watch a Ghibli film, there's just this sense of passion. Like you can feel the work and passion, blood, sweat, and tears that went into each of these films. However, I was not always like this. At one point, I literally did not know what Studio Ghibli was. I had seen pictures of the girl from Spirited Away, which I will talk about in a minute. I actually was introduced to this series through the most recent Ghibli film, and that is titled The Boy and the Heron. This movie released like 2 years ago, and the story about how I saw this movie for the first time was that one of my teachers saw that this movie was coming out, and since a lot of people in our class were huge Ghibli fans, he decided that he offered that anyone that was still in New York City, this is before winter break, we could plan where to meet, plan a time to go see the movie, and we would all watch it together. So basically, I saw this movie for free. Before I get into my critiques, The Boy and the Heron was a beautiful film. I personally found the main character to be a little bit of a brat at the start. Not the very, very beginning, but in the early parts of it, he seemed very brat-like, and it was a tiny bit annoying. But as the movie kind of went on, I kind of, obviously, for one, based on the very opening scene, which I'm going to talk about in a second, it makes sense why he kind of acts the way that he did in the early parts of the movie. But the one thing that surprised me was how much people talked about Ghibli films and how much Miyazaki loves to set these establishing shots in the beginning of the film. This film immediately starts with the given context that, if I'm not wrong, it starts with the given context that this takes place during the Pacific War, and our main character is awoken, like everyone else in his town, from the alarms due to a firebombing that was happening in his town of Tokyo. I'm pretty sure it's like an old Tokyo. From that, we learn that his mother, who was in the hospital, died during said firebombing because she was at the hospital that was burnt down. So that was an insane start to the film, and I went into this film completely blind, not just of this story, but just Ghibli films in general. I've heard people talk about Ghibli films, but I had no idea what any of the characters were like. I didn't know what the stories were like. All I knew was that the animation was beautiful, but I had barely seen footage. I had just seen pictures. Back to The Boy and the Heron. The movie started off extremely intense, which in of itself isn't a problem, but it's not something I expected at all. I think most people that described Ghibli films to me were talking about movies like Spirited Away and Kiki's Delivery Service. Both movies that, again, we will talk about later. We'll get through all of them. This movie fit in a very weird spot. Now, obviously, like I said before, the movie still had a lot of beauty to it. I still loved the characters. I kind of was annoyed with the heron at the start, but he kind of grew on me as the movie went on. And also, the younger version of Kiriko is like a lot more powerful. It's like she seemed pretty cool. I really liked her design. She just seemed like a very strong character that would kind of push our protagonist along. I don't know. I think one of the more confusing things in the beginning as well was in the early parts of the movie, after the death of his mother, him and his father move across town. I just remember when he went to the new school, he got bullied to the point that where he was getting bullied to the point where it led to him getting into a fight. But after the fight ended, he beat himself over the head with a sharp rock, causing himself to bleed profusely. And I just remember seeing that scene in theaters, and I was just appalled because I did not know if he was trying to take his own life. I didn't know if he was just trying to exaggerate the pain that was caused from that school fight. So I just kind of was in shock. It was it was a bit of a weird opening. I'll admit that. I don't mind when movies have intense openings like that, but it felt very weird. There were a lot of other things. I'll be so honest. The parakeets, to this day, and by the way, I saw the film again recently, and I still don't fully get the parakeets, like the big birds that are around the place. I didn't fully understand their purpose in the movie. Maybe again, I just wasn't paying attention, and maybe I just have the comprehension of a glazed donut. But there were many times where I just kept looking at the screen, and I could not understand how certain parts of the story were supposed to piece together into whatever the ending was. So my whole thing is that, hmm, yeah, I don't really know how to describe this film. Again, I still think as a film, as a animation film, it's still really good. But as a Studio Ghibli film, on my list, it currently sits in last place. So on to the next film. I remember immediately after telling my friends that I had watched my first Ghibli film, one of my friends, who was a very avid Ghibli fan, heard that I started watching The Boy and the Heron, and she was immediately surprised that I started with a movie like that, and she immediately told me that when it comes to Ghibli films, I highly recommend that you should watch something next, like Kiki's Delivery Service. And I was like, oh, I've seen her before, and that little black cat that she has around her. Yeah, I'll watch this one. So me, her, and a couple of other friends ended up watching this film at her and her boyfriend's place. I hope I said that right. I don't know. I'm talking. It's very late at night. I hope I worded that correctly. So I saw Kiki's Delivery Service, and I'm being so for real. Within the first like 30 minutes of the film, I was already far more engaged and enjoyed it far more than The Boy and the Heron. Listen, I understand that maybe there was just something going on. I know there's a lot of things context-wise with The Boy and the Heron, and I'm not gonna really keep continuing to talk about that movie because now we're here to talk about Peak. So, Kiki's Delivery Service immediately was just the best thing I can say. Obviously, I'm gonna say the same thing about a lot of Ghibli films. Again, there's just a lot of beauty in a lot of these. I especially love the town that Kiki ends up staying in. It's a beautiful town by the ocean, and there were so many interesting characters that she interacted with throughout the journey. I remember one of my favorite ones was Ursula. When Kiki runs into Ursula, she's like this cool, like young painter, and her whole thing basically was like helping Kiki regain her motivation when she was kind of in this little depression slump because she felt like she was losing her powers. Which, to a degree, she was, but she was kind of more understanding. I think Ursula was like the perfect example of like, she kind of broke down something that even I have related to, similar to Kiki, where I have gotten like while I haven't lost my, I guess, music making ability, there was definitely a point where I just was not as happy with it, or I felt like I was making music worse than what I was doing the year or two prior. So what ended up happening was what you guys, if you're if you're a longtime viewer of mine, you probably saw in my art video, which was that I pretty much just stopped doing music for a few months and focused on doing other things, like drawing, watching anime, and binge watching Adventure Time. Like, I just did other things. And then when I got back into that mojo for making music, I was able to funnel all that passion and push that into my junior project during the previous semester, the semester that just ended. Point is, the movie is really, really good, and it just spoke to me a lot, especially with this movie feels very much like a feel-good coming-of-age story. And I'm gonna be honest, and based on not just my list, but just what I'm understanding more and more about me as a person, is that I just really like these type of coming-of-age stories, because it's the type of coming of age is the type of genre that it focuses on two things that I really enjoy. One, it relates to maybe some part of my inner childhood, whether it be the main characters are children and they go through similar feelings emotions that they're going through similar events or emotions that I felt when I was their age. Or even for me as a young adult, right? I'm 21. A lot of these plot lines still feel like they kind of relate to me in some sense. But basically, yeah, that was one of the biggest reasons. Kiki's delivery service was really nice. I thought it was pretty. I really thought I liked the main character. And fun fact, I actually saw this movie a second time, like a few days ago with some friends in theaters, because I know Ghibli films do that every year. Like sometimes they come back in theaters. We got bonus footage afterwards. I hope I'm able to say this and not get like copywriting or something. I'm not going to show footage from it, but essentially I remember in context, Miyazaki had like no experience when it came to adolescent girls. He grew up surrounded solely by brothers, and he has two sons and no daughters. So he basically had no experience aside from, I think, his co-producer's daughter. In the end, he just pretty much just used her as a reference, and honestly, it turned out pretty good. So, I'm sure Miyazaki, I don't know how he feels about how he ended up making things. I forgot how he said he felt, but I think he did a good job. So, you know, congrats to him. The movie was peak. I personally put Kiki's Delivery Service automatically into number 3 on the list. And next up we have My Neighbor Totoro, which is, I think, if I'm not wrong, it's like one of, if not the first big name that kind of set Studio Ghibli like to a big level, to the level that it is at, to the level that it's at now. My Neighbor Totoro it's an interesting one. So it kind of has the opposite issue that The Boy and the Heron has, where The Boy and the Heron felt like it was super difficult to comprehend at times, but Totoro was like the exact opposite, to where the movie was like surprisingly easy in many regards. So it gave off this like weird kind of like, as you're watching the film, it's very easy to just kind of like it was easy to understand, which is a good thing, but it felt like too easy. Like the movie felt like I was supposed to, the plot always felt like it was meant to be something crazy, and realistically the craziest that the plot got was when two main characters, like Satsuki and Mei, the two sisters, are under the impression that their mom died. I forgot why, but they were under the impression at some point towards the end that their mother had died, and that's why they couldn't visit her in the hospital. When in reality, she just got hit with like I think like a common cold. So the hospital had to like delay her treatment to let her run her fever down or whatever. So the girls were in pure disbelief that their mother had died. So that led to the two of them. I'm pretty sure. Again, I could be wrong about this plot synopsis. The two of them ended up splitting up because they just got into a fight, and then the two sisters separated. And then eventually, thanks to Totoro, they managed to reconnect and then make their way to the hospital. And towards the end, the mother ends up recovering from, I think, like a long time illness that she had been dealing with. Comes back home, plays with the kids, and Totoro watches them play happily. The end. Apparently, when I learned more in context, that Totoro was basically made pretty much entirely for children, which is why the movie, even in like Japanese subtitle, even if you watch it subbed, the movie was extremely easy to understand. It's one of the few forms of media that I'm able to watch and not focus on the subtitles, because even the Japanese that they use is not like insanely complicated or like really fast. It's like a few words. I think the movie was just solid. In terms of the story, it was very bare bones, and the movie itself overall, it's one of the earlier Ghibli films, and even in the animation, and not in the animation, even design wise, it feels not dated. Dated isn't the right word, but you can definitely tell that this is like an early Ghibli film, as opposed to something like the next film we're going to talk about. I personally put it, I think, number 6 on my list, just above The Boy and the Heron. But again, I will admit there is a significant jump between The Boy and the Heron and Totoro. The next film that I watched was Princess Mononoke. I remember I told myself that from this point onwards, I would watch these next couple of Ghibli films in order of release. Starting from Princess Mononoke, I've watched the next couple of Ghibli films in order based on release. Princess Mononoke was another one of the more gritty Ghibli films, which honestly I was a little excited, kind of, post The Boy and the Heron. I was very curious what like an older, more gritty Ghibli film kind of like touched upon, and this movie did not fail. I'll tell you that right now. I thought Princess Mononoke was pretty good. Again, it's a big step up from whatever The Boy and the Heron was trying to do. Princess Mononoke was very interesting. I noticed this movie, if I'm not wrong, was the first time that Miyazaki decided to mix the hand-drawn animation with computer-generated imagery. It was an interesting choice. I think, in my opinion, especially for the time, which this movie came out in the late 90s, yeah, 97, the CGI looked pretty good to me. Like, I don't know what I was expecting anything going into it, so it was a pretty good decision. It made a lot of like the demons, the whole like demon aspect of this movie really stand out, because it really showed like the dark severity around like these type of forces in the film. One thing I personally remember is that I liked the first half of the film, but the second half of the film is where I was like really like invested. The part of the movie that I was personally the most engaged was when the boars started to launch an assault on the nearby town, but they were starting to get like wiped out, and like the screen was now just flashing from all types of like explosions, the boars getting launched everywhere, there was just noise, all while our main character, I always forget their name, Ashitaka, I should probably just say it like that, was on his way, I'm pretty sure with, Princess Mononoke. So, or San, I guess. So my whole thing is that this film was really good, and it fits into that category again where I just thought it was beautiful. I thought it was nice. I thought it was well done. However, I do think that it's not like it definitely was like again a better film, but I see Princess Mononoke as like a significantly better Boy in the Heron. For that I honestly would give Princess Mononoke a lot more credit. This is one of the films I do want to watch again. Even the plot was not like Totoro simple, but it was definitely, it had a lot more depth to it. Although I do wish they played around a little bit more with like the very beginning area. I noticed that with a couple of Ghibli films, once Ashitaka leaves town, we just don't really hear anything of it. Like, the town pretty much is just non-existent, and it's like, well, because even with Kiki's delivery service, you at least get the ending cutscene where like they, the mom and dad get like a message from her back home, right? At least there's like something, you know what I mean? I'm not saying it always has to be the happiest ending in the world. It needs to be something. Okay, so the next movie, which I'm pretty sure is one of, if not like the most popular Ghibli film of all time, is Spirited Away. Now, this was the only movie that I actually had a small reference going into it, and that is the poster for the movie. This was like the only image in my head that I had when I thought of Studio Ghibli, and I am here to tell y'all right now, this movie did not disappoint in the slightest. This, hands down. Oh yeah, by the way, I completely forgot to rank, by the way. Princess Mononoke I put in number 5. Again, it's above Totoro and above The Boy and the Heron, but there's a significant gap between Mononoke and Totoro, and a significant gap between Totoro and Boy and the Heron. Back to Spirited Away. Where was I at? Oh yeah, Spirited Away by far is my favorite Ghibli film. I know it's the common pick that a lot of people have, and I'm sure some people are going to be like, oh, maybe when you watch more, or when you watch them again, maybe so, but I'll be honest, I'm with the majority here. Spirited Away is really good. I don't know what Miyazaki was on, I don't know what him and his team were cooking, but that was beautiful. The movie in of itself was like, how do I describe it? I just loved my favorite thing about the whole film, in my opinion, was watching Chihiro, the main character, her like confidence slowly rising throughout the movie. But they did it in a lot of like subtle ways, and they did it in a way that felt really human, and I loved it. So for example, when there were like I think like at a certain point in the movie there was like a montage of like her working with another one of like the ladies there at the bathhouse. Again, I'm summarizing, so bear with me if the plot sounds a little off. When Chihiro was helping out around the bathhouse, she was messing up all the time. She was constantly struggling to push heavy things, pull heavy levers, move certain things. She struggled a lot. But what stuck out the most was that she still kept going. And she herself knew that she was struggling to do these tasks. And she still managed to do them. There are two scenes that really stuck out to me. One was when she managed to drag this like almost like just completely muddied spirit from outside all the way into the bathhouse and gave him a bath all by herself, knowing that this thing stunk. By the way, this was the spirit. This was like a water spirit, but it was so covered in just dirt and gunk and mud and just like actual straight up like bikes and items on it that he stunk, and it was just muddy everywhere. But despite that, she pushed through, and bear in mind she was still struggling. She struggled to pull down the lever because it was heavy. She struggled to lead it into the bath bit by bit. She had to fill it with water, and that was it. You know what I mean? Things weren't perfect, but she still made it work, and that felt really good to see. So that's one. Another example is the scene with her on the very beginning scene with her going down this windy staircase. Like at first she sees this windy staircase and she probably thought you can see, we as the viewer can see, right? She's scared, right? This staircase looks so old and rickety it could fall apart at any point, which it almost did. She haphazardly just ran down the stairs. Well, first she did it slowly, and as soon as the stairs started to like bend a bit, she just ran immediately in just pure fear. Again, she got through the task even though she was scared. There was the scene where she was trying to lead No Face to the boat, and she saw that the only way for her to get there was for her to basically run across this metal pipe and get to the other side of the building. Now, if this was the Chihiro from the beginning of the movie, then she would have easily just have been scared and maybe like haphazardly ran through. But towards the end of the movie, she pulled up her pants and just sprinted across the pipe and didn't look back even once. And I thought that was such a cool thing to make her do. Those were amazing. Also, this is completely random and a tiny, tiny side tangent that I had to do my own research, which was that I noticed that with a lot of Ghibli films, especially in Spirited Away, especially because of the character Yubaba, Miyazaki always like presents old people, especially old women, in such a unique manner. Yubaba specifically, I'm gonna say this pretty bluntly, I thought her design was like really ugly. Like not ugly as in like unappealing ugly, but ugly in the sense that like like you look at her and you knew that she was like, she definitely, maybe she wasn't evil, but she definitely was not a good guy. You feel me? I knew there was something going on, but I don't know. There were certain scenes where like they would just have her nose the size of Chihiro's head up close, and it was like, it's one of those things where it's like, dog, you didn't have to do that. You know what I mean? So what else to even talk about? Honestly, this film is it's peak, dude. I don't know what to say. It's peak. I love it. Yeah, no, I got nothing to say. I mean, obviously I could do more, but I'm gonna be so for real. It's like 12:30, and I just desperately want to talk about these films and then go to bed. Spirited Away is my number one. We're just gonna get that out the way. Okay, so the next movie that I watched was Howl's Moving Castle. And I remember watching it at like 2 in the morning because I was like, oh, I can't fall asleep. So you know what? I'm going to keep binge watching my Ghibli films and I'm going to watch Howl's Moving Castle. And I fell asleep like 2/3 of the way into the movie. So I had to watch it again. Like I had to pretty much watch like the remaining 45 minutes again the following. However, I did not fall asleep because this movie was boring. This movie had a lot of good things going for it. Again, it's not my number one personally, but it came very close. I think that this movie especially just talked about a lot of different topics and handled them in a really good way. One of the biggest things that I personally saw just from the main character was that the main character wasn't your typical like damsel in distress. They basically made her a more independent and like, self-caring woman who can actually hold to her own as well as those around her. That's one. And two, because of the events that happened to her pretty much becoming cursed into becoming an elderly woman, she spends a good chunk of the film as an elderly woman, as opposed to the young woman that she normally is. By the way, the main character, Sophie. Sophie pretty much spends most of her time as Grandma Sophie, as some people, as I think either the kid or she herself describes her. My whole thing with that was I found it was a little comedic, just seeing like this grandma just kind of like trying to do things like going up these long flights of stairs and running from place to place. And I found it interesting because it was definitely like a very unique protagonist to have. Even if it wasn't permanent, it was definitely a unique protagonist as opposed to the young and buck hero, right? That Miyazaki could have easily made her fall into. That's one. Two, and this is something I actually looked up, not just for this, but something I also talked about with a friend that I had found out about Miyazaki. Apparently, this film was made pretty much shortly after Miyazaki's, based on Miyazaki's opposition to the US invading Iraq back in '03. Or back in 2003. So the film had a lot of anti-war themes, and he said, and I quote, he made this film pretty much expecting that it would be poorly received by the US because, this film is basically meant to speak on like the huge negative aspects of like war, especially from like more advanced technologies pretty much just bearing down on like more innocent towns, which I always felt like was I always wondered how Miyazaki was able to encapsulate the gruesomeness of war in such a I wouldn't call it beautiful, but in a very tasteful manner. And after looking him up, I realized that the guy is 84. Like, he was born, I'm pretty sure, during World War II, if I'm not wrong. So, and even like when you look through his Wikipedia, some of his first memories that he wrote about were his hometown being bombed during the war. It's like Miyazaki was like born pretty much at like the height. Well, not even like the height, but like he was pretty much born during the last major world war, which is a crazy thing to think about. Anyways, back to the film. The film was beautiful. I really, really liked the characters in this one. Howl himself kind of was a little iffy for me in the beginning, but I kind of grew to like him and understand his character a lot more as time went on. And also, this movie reminds me because this movie had a really, really good main theme. I forgot to talk about the music in Ghibli films. Joe Hisaishi, which apparently isn't even his actual name, that's a stage name. I didn't know that until I looked him up, but he has done a phenomenal job with encapsulating every single one of the films that he's worked on. And no matter what I might think about any of these Ghibli films, I love and cherish the work that this man has done. And I don't know what him or Miyazaki plan on doing in the future, which I'm sounding like I'm wrapping it up, but I'm really not. The movie was beautiful. I thought it was great. I put Howl's Moving Castle at number 2. So just to recap, in this video, we have Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle, Kiki's Delivery Service, Princess Mononoke, My Neighbor Totoro, and The Boy and the Heron. So currently we have 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. And the last movie fits nice and snug into the number 4 spot. And that movie was Ponyo. Now, I loved the visuals in Ponyo. The opening scene from Ponyo, like The Boy and the Heron and Ponyo have these very, very interesting and just very visually appealing opening cutscenes. But I feel like what Ponyo does better is that Ponyo built the entire environment around Ponyo, as opposed to just having some catastrophic event, or even if it was a positive, having one event that kind of just, drives the player into it, The opening cutscene is just beautiful. You get all of these jellyfish, these various fishes, and that obviously leads to Ponyo and her father. I thought this film was cute. It's kind of surprising that this film kind of just felt, in my opinion, this film to me felt like a better version of what Totoro, in the sense of like this film definitely felt more on the it's for kids side of things, and I feel like that's mostly just because of the fact that the main protagonists were like, small children, similar to Totoro. So maybe that's why I feel that way, but I don't know. I just feel like I feel like Ponyo is like a better Totoro in the same way I feel that Mononoke is a better Boy the Heron. They kind of have similar, maybe I'm just tweaking. It is my video, so you can tell me if I'm wrong in the comments. I feel like they kind of had similar vibes in the sense that like Ponyo did have like in the sense that both of them were pretty simple to follow in terms of like the story, especially for Ponyo. I did like that like undertone about like stuff like pollution to some extent. Like I feel like I don't know, I was expecting the movie to talk a little bit more on like pollution and how it messes with the ocean. I do remember that her father does bring it up, I think once or twice, and I don't remember just how like super important it ends up being in the film, but I wish that was touched upon more. But also similar to Kiki's delivery service, I really like the town that this movie takes place in. When I looked it up, apparently Miyazaki did like, I'm pretty sure he like highly referenced a specific area in Japan for this movie, which I don't remember the name of, but it's like another like portside city. Another portside city. So I thought I thought that was really good. So in my opinion, he did his thing. I don't really have anything crazy to talk about. I also really like just Ponyo's character design, and I thought Ponyo was just extremely adorable. And I feel like when you have a movie where your protagonists are like these small children, they did a good job of not making them like dumb. You know what I mean? I feel like a lot of shows and movies can get into that trope where, oh, my main character is 5, 6, 7 years old, therefore they're just a dumb, stupid, obnoxious kid. And it's like our main character, Sosuke, nor Ponyo, well, the main characters, Sosuke nor Ponyo, felt like they were like overbearing to deal with. It's just, they're kids. So naturally there's going to be things that they get wrong. There's naturally moments where they're going to have those high moments, those highly emotional moments, where there be happiness, sadness, or anger. Another thing I also found a little, just not hugely disappointing, but something I kind of also wish they talked on a little bit more, was the relationship between Lisa and Sosuke's father. Like at some point I do remember vividly that Sosuke's father tried to call home. He basically called home saying that he's gonna have to stay overseas, he's gonna stay over the water just a little bit longer. So what he ends up doing is when he calls home, basically Lisa answers and she's just super pissed at knowing that, he's pretty much just gonna stay overseas. And the film made it seem like she was basically like the mask was slipping, and I wish that like some moments like that came up a little bit more in the film, maybe like once or twice. Oftentimes I feel like a lot of parents put on this mask, especially in like very serious situations like that. It's very common that one parent will just put on a mask in front of the kids. But I kind of like that the movie exposed that, like, she isn't perfect. She's not happy with the fact that, that her husband is constantly just away for long periods of time. And I don't really know what else to say. I thought the film was nice. Again, it was also very, very beautiful. And yeah, so that puts us at number 4. And yeah, for anyone who kept up till the end, great job. Thank you for watching. Here is a full-on list, and this is also going to include not just the rankings, but the scoring system that I have. So, for example, the number 1 film, Spirited Away, is a 10 out of 10, and that is basically used as the benchmark for all of the films from 2 through 7, just so you can gauge the difference in how I feel about these films. So that's it for today. If you guys enjoyed, leave a like, comment, leave a like, comment down below, drop a sub if you haven't already, hit the notification bell so you guys are always notified whenever I post or a video. Tell a friend, stay hydrated, drink some water, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.